Hey, I'm Kai. Fractal just released a pretty major beta firmware upgrade for the FM3, and I want to check out some of it in this video. You can get the FM3 beta by going to the Fractal forum, which I'll leave a link to in the description box down below. As this is beta firmware, don't update if you have an important gig coming up, because there can still be little bugs. We have a ton of new spring reverbs, shimmer reverbs, we have a new amp model, a bunch of remastered amp models. There's also 7 new compressors, 2 new phasers, and a bunch of quality of life upgrades as well, such as a tighter noise gate, which I'm personally pretty excited about. The main headline for me personally though is that there are a ton of new drive pedals. We have 10 brand new drive effects as well as 4 remastered or updated drives. Before I get into that though, I want to mention that I recently set up Tom-Ann affiliate links, which you can find in the description box. I'll keep these links updated with as much of my gear as I can, so check them out. It doesn't cost you a penny to use and it gives me a nice little kickback. I think the amp I'd like to start out with to demonstrate some of these drives is the high power model, the Hiwatt DR103. Now, I know I use this amp an awful lot in the Fractal FM3, but it really is a great base for running drive pedals into. I'm going to run it into the ML Sound Lab Mars TV Mix Steep Impulse Response. There was a big focus in filling out some of the vintage drive categories for this update. The first I'm checking out today is the Color Sound Overdriver, which is known in the Fractal as the Colortone OD. While the original pedal of this only had bass, treble, and gain, the Fractal FM3 model adds a master volume, as is standard with pretty much every Fractal model. Let's hear my dry tone first, and then we'll kick on this pedal. This pedal definitely has a kind of fuzzy texture to it, but it's also amp-like in a way. Sort of like if you mixed a JCM 800 with a Rat, for instance. You've got that big chunky JCM 800 thing, but you've also got that upper fuzzy texture of a Rat. The next drive pedal I want to check out is one that a lot of modern metal players especially are going to really enjoy, despite this being a vintage style pedal. For this I'm going to switch to the Rev amp model, and I'm going to switch the cabinet out for the Mega Gent cab. I'll also change out guitars and grab my Balaguer Growler, which is in drop E. Now, some of you may have been able to figure this one out already just based on the context, but this is the TC Electronic Integrated Preamp. In the Fractal, this is called the Integral Pre. This is a drive that is super aggressive, super cutting, and it really suits low tunings nicely. If you're not familiar with the TC integrated preamp, you're probably familiar with some of its spin-offs and clones, such as the Fortin 33, the Fortin Grind, and the Pepper's Dirty Tree. It's one of the most extreme sounding EQs in a boost pedal that I can think of. It severely cuts out a lot of the lows, as well as adding quite a nice peak to the highs. This is a pedal that can cut out the mud from pretty much any amp. We will of course start by hearing what this rev sounds like dry. Okay, now we'll kick on the Integral Pre. I've got the bass pretty much all the way down, the treble almost all the way up, and the levels just past 6. Just super aggressive. As you can probably tell, I'm having a lot of fun checking this one out. Anyway, I'll switch back to the PRS for the next bit. Now, as a precursor to some of the other upcoming drive models that I'll be testing out in this demo, I do need to mention that the Big Muff model specifically had some updates. If you've seen my channel before, you're probably not super surprised to hear that when I saw the words Big Muff crop up on the release notes, I was ecstatic. I'm also going to switch out to the new amplifier for this. This is the JCM 820 watt, the studio version. I've got it set up on sort of the edge of breakup. I guess this is kind of a crunchy tone if you start to dig in. Let's just hear what that's doing before we get into this Big Muff. We're also back on the Mars TV mix Steep for this. Definitely too bright on its own, but it'll make sense when we start adding in the Big Muff. So the new sort of headline features for the Big Muff upgrades are that we can turn the tone knob off, and we've now got the wicker switch. I'll show what it sounds like stock first, and then we'll bypass the tone knob. One thing worth mentioning here is that the bypass tone knob does add an awful lot of volume, as it's taking out a fair amount of the circuit, so we'll compensate for that. And again with the tone knob bypassed. Now we'll play about with it with the wicker switch on. This boosts the high mids at a component level. It's not super audible on dark tones, but on a brighter tone you can really hear it. I think I do prefer it with the wicker switch on, especially for lead work, as you can kind of hear the lead lines poking out a little bit more. We do have some more advanced features in the Big Muff now that let you further tweak the diode selection, but in the interest of brevity, I'll leave that out for this video. So the first of 3 new Big Muffs is the Pi Triangle. This is the original 1971 Big Muff, the sort of holy grail of Big Muffs. One thing I'd like to mention here is that I'm really excited to see these Big Muffs being added, as it's something that I specifically called out when I was doing my first impressions video of the FM3 about a year ago now. I do think I prefer Helix's selection of things like drive pedals. On the Helix you've got the Ram's Head Big Muff, you've got the Triangle Big Muff. On the Fractal you've got one simple Big Muff circuit, but then you can go into the advanced parameters and change the clipping diodes, for instance. While the previous Big Muff model in the Fractal was based on the New York City current production run V9 Big Muff, this is the classic. Let's hear what this one's doing. Let's also try it out on a lower gain tone too, but in my experience, Big Muffs really like having these sustain close to maxed out. In this update, we also have a mid-70s ram's head Big Muff. This is the version 2 Big Muff. These models are more mid-scooped, they're slightly more aggressive, and they have a lot more bass. Again, we'll try that one out on an even lower gain tone. However, I found that the sweet spot for this one is sort of 5.5 to 6 on the gain pot. In fact, I may go against the grain here and engage the wicker switch for this. Definitely prefer it with that wicker switch engaged. Now the final new Big Muff for this trio is a much later model. This is the 90s Russian Big Muff, known to the Fractal as the Civil War. These are typically much lower gain with more mids and a lot smoother than the originals. It's the sort of Big Muff pedal you'd associate with indie rock artists rather than the stoner rock or doomy sort of artists. Yeah, this doesn't really sound anything like the other Big Muffs in my experience anyway. It sounds a lot more like a standard distortion than the Big Muff blown out fuzzy wall sort of thing. I'll quickly compare the 3 new Big Muffs against the original Big Muff so that you can hear the differences between them. They've all been level matched, so they're hitting the amplifier at the same level, the sustain on them is maxed out, and the tone knob is sort of 2.5 to 3-ish. So in that test, I've learned a few things really. I think the regular Big Muff has a tendency to fold in on itself, while the triangle Big Muff doesn't really do that, though otherwise they do sound pretty similar. The ram's head is noticeably more scooped, and it does sound kind of filtered, especially through this setup that I've got here. The Russian Big Muff sounds nothing like the other versions, and this is exactly why I wanted to see them in the Fractal. It's an awful lot more articulate, it's still got that huge Big Muff thickness to it, but it doesn't have that high sizzle sort of thing that the other ones suffer from. It just generally feels like it'd sit in a mix quite a lot better. Next up is a modern classic sort of pedal. The 77 Custom OD is based on the MXR Custom Badass. This should pair really nicely with the Soldano SLO 100 model in the Fractal, with the gain pulled back a little bit. This pedal really serves itself well when it's adding a little bit of saturation to the amp as well as level. Of course, we'll hear what the amp sounds like unboosted, so you know what we're working with. This is again into the Mars TV Mix Steep IR. This does sound like a pretty tight, dry tone already, but you have to pick pretty hard and pretty accurately to get it to really chug. Let's engage the pedal and just hear the differences that this is making. Yeah, it just really tightens things up, gives it a nice bit of saturation, and just makes it a lot easier to play to. The last new fuzz that I want to try out for this demo is called the Super Fuzz in the Fractal, and it's based on the Univox Super Fuzz. This is a classic fuzz pedal in an iconic enclosure that's been cloned a billion times. Most notably probably the Boss FZ2 and then in turn the Behringer Super Fuzz. While the original model only had a fuzz control, a volume control and a tone switch, the Fractal model expands on this with a bias control. This allows you to either starve or goose the power to the pedal, which can give you some really big octavey artifacts. Now I really like how this one sounds into a pretty crunchy amp, so I'm actually going to stick with the Soldano SLO 100 for this. It's very aggressive, very doomy, but a lot of fun. I completely forgot that I still had the noise gate on for that, so I apologise for those tails getting cut off at the end there. I think that's a really fantastic sounding fuzz pedal, albeit very difficult to get sounding good. Now the final pedal that I'm checking out for this demo is the Ibanez MT10 Distortion, otherwise known as the MOSFET in the Fractal. I'll switch back to the high power model for this as well. Now this is actually a pedal that I knew pretty much nothing about coming into this video. It's a pedal that I knew that Wampler had cloned recently with their MOSFET, but other than that, really didn't know all that much. It's Ibanez, it's green, it's kind of like a tube screamer I guess, so I'll swap out to the Schecter Nick Johnston and we'll try out some expensive lead tones. We're starting out on the cleanest of clean tones for this, let's hear what that's like. Yeah, not a huge fan of that, so let's kick on the MOSFET distortion. It's definitely got that tube screamery, clean blend sort of thing going on. It's not something that I would like to dial in super distorted through a clean tone, but it does bring it up nicely as a sort of overdrive. The EQ also has a really great range to it, and I just want to show that off quickly. It just really has the ability to fatten up a Strat like this and bring out a really nice lead tone. So I've covered a ton of the drive models already. It's a very long video and I didn't expect it to take this long, and we still haven't covered everything. There are a few things that I don't have time for in this video, such as a 5-knob model of the tube driver, a color sound booster, as well as a redesigned B7K model by Dark Glass, a redesigned DS1 distortion. They also reworked the original tube driver, so there was just a ton of upgrades and a lot of lovely things in this update. Now, if there's anything that I covered that you'd like to see me do in more detail, please do drop a comment down below. Obviously, I didn't have time to go into everything in major detail for this one, but I'd love to dig into some of these a little bit more. Especially things like the diode clipping options in the Big Muff now, but that is a huge deep dive nerdy thing. Overall, I'm really happy with the new drive models in this update. I think my favourite personally was probably the Russian Big Muff. It's just such a nice welcome change from the original Big Muff that we had, and I'm really excited to use it going forward. Now, I've said this many times before, but it does bear repeating. Fractal are absolutely top of the game when it comes to keeping their firmware updated. While the FM3 is a little bit late to the party compared to something like the FM9 or the AXFX3, it does still get all of the major updates eventually, at least the ones that are compatible with the unit. That is everything that I've got for this video though, so thank you ever so much for sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed it, please do feel free to drop me a subscribe and check out the affiliate links in the description box down below. Until next time though, I've been Kai.